numbers. They can be more complicated than you think.
Today we're going to be going over everything numbers, and there's a lot that can go into numbers, and of course a lot of us are probably familiar with counting and numbers like 1 through 100 and that sort of thing, but we're going to start with the basics and maybe cover some common variations for typical numbers. Like, for instance, you may have seen one like this, you may have seen one like this, and we'll kind of go over into more details about why there is a difference between one direction and the other, and also common variations for the teens, and maybe if you're just brand new to numbers, to kind of give you a quick hack to just be able to communicate until you can memorize all the proper ways of signing each number. And then we'll start getting into some more of the advanced stuff, like ordinal numbers, first, second, third. Signs that have to do with like doubles or triples or quadruples, or the differences between saying I'm going to do this 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and some like shorthands that have to do with numbers as well. And then before we end it, we're going to go over some signs that are corresponding to money and how those relate to numbers, and also math. Not going to go too deep into it, but we'll cover some of the basics like addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, equation, exponents, fractions, decimals, just some basic signs to kind of get you through some basic math. So with all that said, I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, and we'll go ahead and start off with a quick hack. And this is one I picked up from Sign Duo, and he said this is a suggestion if you're just getting started learning the numbers, because it can be really overwhelming if you're starting from scratch, especially when you start getting into the 20s, and there's a lot of different ways to do it, and each number tends to have a unique sign for it. So his suggestion was, if you're brand new, learn your numbers 1 through 9 and 0, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 0, right? And so his quick hack, or his suggestion, is if you're just getting started and you just need to communicate like a 3 or 4 digit number, let's say it's like 1,234, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Instead of having to memorize 1,234, you could just do 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's not proper, but it is a quick way and a quick and dirty way to kind of communicate a specific number. And sometimes it's just maybe an address, and we wouldn't sign it in tens of thousands or thousands. We would actually do those numbers as they would appear on an address, 333 West Main Street or something like that, right? So that's kind of a nice, easy way to just do numbers or produce them if you're just getting started. However, if you do want to learn how to sign the numbers properly in ASL, it's a little bit more of a process. So we can start easy and just go 1 through 10. And if you've watched any videos, especially like from ASL Connect from Gallaudet, or many number videos, they usually start off with 1. And the palm is actually facing yourself rather than the other way around. So you would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you rotate your hand 6, 7, 8, 9. And Signed with Heart just came out with a video that I thought was really a nice way of simplifying it, because if you're counting 1 through 10, or if you're going in order, your palm's going to be facing you, right? And her suggestion was just think of anything that is quantitative. So if it's like, I want 2 apples, it's going to be facing yourself, right? And so if it has to do with quantity, that palm is going to be facing yourself. However, in most other cases, like example, if you're doing an address, or if you're doing larger numbers than 1 through 9, your palm is actually going to be the other way around. It's going to be facing out. For example, 100. 100 would be the proper way of doing it, 1C, or some people will do shorthand and do 1 and bend the finger back, just because it's a little faster. So notice that your palm is actually out in that regard. And so the majority of the time, our palm is actually facing out. And again, over time, it becomes more natural, and to know what direction that palm faces. But that is basically the reason why you will see that difference. So if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, palm in. I want 3 apples. I have 2 pears. That palm is going to be facing me. If you're assigning large numbers or a series of numbers, that palm is just going to stay out the whole time. Does that make sense? Okay. So going past 10, right? So if you make it to 10, you give yourself a thumbs up, right? So then we're going to keep going up the number tree. So we're going to go to 11, and again, my palm's facing myself. 12, 13, 14, 15. And this might be basic for some of us, right? But then we get to the 16 through 19, and the shorthand is just twisting, right? 16, 17, 18, 19. But of course, ASL isn't that simple, right? There's lots of variations out there. So just a couple really common ones. 10-6 for 16. 10-7. 10-8. 10-9 for 16, 17, 18, 19. That can actually make it a little bit more clear when you're doing numbers, and especially when you're doing years. Like if you're assigning 1996, that 10-9 actually makes it a little bit more clear that you're talking about a year, and that number is 19 rather than, was it 19 or 9? And it just makes it a little bit clearer. And then the last one, I was just watching a video from Bill Vickers, and he was going through numbers 1 through 30, and he called this, I always called it the violin, but he called it itchy fingers. 16, 17, 18, and 19. And don't worry too much about memorizing that one. It's really rare. So far, out of a few hundred deaf that we've met over the years, we met one that signs it that way. So it's a pretty rare way of signing it, but it's good to know. It's good to have that in your repertoire, right? So going on to the 20s. Are we good from like 1 through 19? I know I'm throwing a lot at you right now. Okay. So 20, we have 20. And if you're doing the year 2020, it's a little different. You wouldn't do 20 and then 20. Shorthand, 2020. 2020 has been a fun year. Right. 21, it's 21, and this has some directionality. Some people do it 21, 21, 21. Usually, the more comfortable position is going to be the default. So for the most comfortable position, I've noticed, is just your wrist being straight. And this is going to be the case when you do fingerspelling too, right? So your wrist is almost always in a straight position. Like we wouldn't do C to the sideways. We're not turning our wrist. Our wrist is just kind of locked in a straight pattern. And so the number 21 is usually the same way. We just kind of keep that comfortable straight wrist and do 21. But you will see 21, 21, and it has a few different ways of doing it. But basically it's just that thumb, right? 22. All doubles are going to have that bounce to it. It's kind of nice because it has that pattern. So you have 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, 77, 88, and 99, which is also coincidentally the same sign for French fries. Okay, and then 23. So 23, again, it has its own sign. So this is why learning your numbers, if you're just getting started, can be a little overwhelming. Because you're like, oh my gosh, I have to remember palm in for 1 through 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, where's it? 6, 7, 8, 9. And it can be really overwhelming. But hang in there. It gets easier with time. So 23 has its own sign. And again, this is where variations come into place. Technically, it's L4 for 24. More and more is becoming more common to see 23. Or sorry, 24. Sorry. But yeah, so either 1, 2, 4, or L4 for 24. And then we go back to 25 having its own sign, right? So 23, and then 25, and then 26. Again, this is optional. You could do 26, 27, 28, 29, or 26, 27, 28, and 29. And if you've been doing it one way for a long time, it's really tough to change. And me too. I learned it with the L.
I can't do this. This messes with my brain. I'm like, oh, it's just gross. I'm like, no, I'm the L person. I'm forever the L. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way.
It's just preference.
Yeah, it's just preference. You know, just like how you would say hi a million different ways in English. Hi, hello,
Hey,
hi, hey, what you doing?
What's up?
What's up? Yeah. And again, and that's kind of a common theme. We want to be careful about like labeling things right or wrong based on how we were taught. Usually there's more than one way of signing things, and it's good to just kind of become familiar.
I was that person. It was like, wrong! Yeah, it was so bad. Yeah, it was so bad.
And honestly, I think that's everybody. Like 99.9% of us, like, oh, well, I learned it this way, right?
Such a common thing to say, too.
And the way I learned it is the right way. But, yeah, so get off our high horse sometimes and realize that, you know, sign language, like any other language, is just full of variations. And where did I leave off on? 29? And then once you get through past 29, it gets really easy. It really does. So 30 on up is basically kind of going back to that number hack we were talking about before. You just stack the digits. So 30 becomes 30. 31 becomes 31. 32. Got the double. 34, 35. And you just do that for the rest of the numbers. And anytime you hit that double, you want to make sure you bounce that double. And everything else is, you're just basically stacking digits. If you want to get a little bit more technical, and again, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but when we were learning it, we were taught that if you're having double-digit number, that is, like, let's say, for example, it's 67.
Oh.
So you twist up from 6 and up to 7, right? So you're going up from a smaller digit to a larger digit. The other way is if you had 76, you're dropping down 76 because you're dropping down in value. And you know, it makes things a little easier to catch if you're on the receiving end, if you understand that concept, especially if you have 67 versus 76. That twisting helps with that receptive comprehension. But it's not necessary, and honestly, not a lot of people do it. A lot of people just do static 67, 76, 86, 96.
Just a question, Chris. Do you always have your hand up, or do you ever see people doing it like down?
I do see it. It's more lazy to have your hand down, but typically the hand's always up. It's just more clear, so there's no confusion with it. But this turning thing, it all depends on if you were taught that. It doesn't make it any less confusing if you do it. Like if I was to assign 86 to you, you would know it was 86. To you, I would just have a weird accent because my hand moved. Like, huh, that's funny. She's got a weird little tick when she does it. If you were never taught that. Versus if somebody went 86, I would still understand. I would just know that they were never taught the twist. So it's just kind of... What's the matter, Jerry?
I think they call them the rocking numbers, right?
The rocking numbers? Yeah. I've heard them called that, where they rock back and forth, depending on... Yeah. Yeah, it helped us. It helped because we watch a lot of lectures in sign language, and then he does a lot in sign language, and he still does this anytime he's doing any type of number or even a year. Like if he does 1986, he still he'll rock it, and that's just how we were taught. But I do notice that it does help make it a little more clear sometimes, especially if you're in a stadium and you're seeing it from afar and you're like, what was that? But you caught the rock. You're like, okay, it's got to be some number there.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Now, I like signing, but the numbers, I don't care about the numbers. Is that wrong?
Not really. And numbers, it's funny because you can kind of cheat with the numbers. You don't really have to learn the technicalities of like the 20s. And we've come across quite a few deaf, especially in our local area. They don't do that. Like for the 21, they'll do 21. They won't do 21. It's kind of trippy when you've been doing it for a really long time, but you know, that's out there. And do I automatically don't understand what you signed? What's this? You know, you still understand. And numbers, you can kind of cheat that way. Letters, not so much. But numbers, you can definitely kind of cheat your way through, at least until it becomes more natural, and it will come in time. Go ahead, babe.
I'll tell you, one of the reasons why it's so important to do this, like for 2 versus this, I was interpreting for one of my deaf clients at an eye doctor's appointment, and they had to do the letter number thing. And as my client is doing this, you know, it's like, oh, it's R5, whatever. He never did this. He went, luckily I could see and I knew what he was doing, but he did V and 2 because they were right next to each other. And it was the same, he never came in. So that, for me, it threw me off because I'm like, V, and before I said it, I looked over at it and I'm like, oh, he did 2. But that twist was never there. His palm wasn't facing forward. So sometimes if you're doing something like that, that maybe it's a code. And so it's like, oh yeah, it was 4-2-V-W-7 or whatever. That palm orientation is going to be really important to do so you can differentiate between the letter V and the number 2. Same thing,
W and 6.
W and 6. I mean, 9 and F. Those ones you can't really, there's no method to that madness. But with the 2 and the V.
One differentiating thing for like the 6 and the 9 is I've seen tap tap for 6, tap tap for 9. And then, like, if it's an acronym, for example, like you would kind of wiggle it to indicate that it's like F period. Or if you're doing like a W. And usually that W, that thumb is super subtle, but that thumb is usually on top of that pinky nail. And whereas 6, they're just barely touching.
Yeah.
But 9, it's indistinguishable.
It can be hard.
And so, especially when you're doing, like she was saying, like codes, or maybe you're doing a math equation, and there's a big difference between a letter and a number. One thing, keep that palm orientation in mind for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But also, it helps to mouth the word or the letter or the number just to make sure that is being comprehended. Like 6 is a lot different than W.
Yeah.
So that can also help too. And it won't help everybody. You know, there are some that don't understand how to lip read, or they don't know. Like there are some deaf out there that don't know how to read or don't know the English words for the signs at all. And so that's something too. Like we tend to fall back on fingerspelling, but we got to know our audience. We got to know who we're talking to, and that may not be a backup that they understand. So you might just end up acting your way through it until you can get your point across.
And I'll tell you that those little small markers that, like for 6 where it taps, or that 9 or the F, it kind of wiggles back and forth. A lot of that's a learned behavior. I was never taught to do that. It was just something that I learned over the course of learning sign language, and I picked up from other people. It's not really something that's taught. It's just one of those things that's kind of out there. I learned it later, actually, when I became an interpreter. My boss did it, and she caught me not doing it and was like, hey. And I'm like, I learned that there's like these small little tips and things to help differentiate certain things like that, like 9 and F, 6 and W, and like that tap tap, so you know it's a number. Very subtle, and if you're not really paying attention, you would probably miss it, but your brain will automatically say, oh, it's a number, versus W, and it just kind of like W, you'll know, oh, that's a letter. And it's funny, you don't realize it in the moment, but eventually you'll kind of start picking up, there's a lot of small little things like that throughout the language. But for numbers specifically, you'll see that tap, tap, or wiggle if you're trying to differentiate between that letter and number.
Yeah, it's usually not a too big of a problem. It's not common that you're jumbling up numbers and letters.
Unless you do it for work.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're talking about, I was born in year whatever, okay, those are all numbers. Or you're talking about
context will tell you that everything that's going to be produced is going to be a number, and you shouldn't get it confused with a 9 and an F. if we're talking about a year.
Yeah, like, oh, my name is Wilson, and you're like, wait, 6 ILSON? That's not going to happen, right? You're not going to confuse W for 6. But yeah, context can really help if it's like hey, enter this promotional code for 10% off, and the code is 3C1 V2, and like then that helps differentiate it. But don't worry about it too much, and it will pick up in time.
It's funny with the reverse. Rachel Coleman, she's the one who does signing time. Her deaf daughter was, I think she was in a race or something. Yeah. And they went 1, 2, 3, go. And her daughter, Mom, why are they saying 1, 2, W? What does that even mean?
No, it was 1, 2, 6. Like, why are they skipping numbers? 1, 2, 6.
Why are they saying 1, 2, 6? Why 1, 2, 6? And Rachel was like, no, in English, their numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4. And she was like, but that doesn't make sense. So it has the reverse effect too, where even they can get confused, like 1, 2, 6. What? But yeah, it's just one of those things. Numbers, they can be more complicated than you think.
I know, right? Like, you thought you knew numbers until now.
There's all kinds of crazy stuff.
Madison, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to ask a question. Like, do you know, I know so like quantities, you'd have it this way, and I know like phone numbers, all the numbers are facing out, but for like a code or where there's numbers and letters mixed, you do turn it back, even though that's not a quantity. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, there are...
Or is that just a way to differentiate, or would you normally still sign like 4 and 3 and 1 facing out?
Can you grab that blue Master ASL book real quick? It's right next to the linguistics.
Or like, do you have other examples of when you'd sign out versus in, I guess?
Yeah, let me go ahead and see if I can find this. If you ever want to brush up on like more technicalities of numbers and, let's see here, it's fingerspelling, numbers, and glossing. Master ASL. It's a little on the older side. I think it's from 2006. Yeah, it's from 2006, but it's got a lot of great clarity as far as kind of in what situations you would do like numbers, for example. And he has a chart in here. Let me see if I can find it really quick. But like he talks about, double letters when you're fingerspelling. When would you fingerspell on top of a letter versus sliding the letter? But yeah, it'll be a little bit in there. I really got to dog ear those pages so I can find it faster. But basically, like you were saying, like if it's a series of numbers, usually that palm's just facing out the entire time. And if it's an address, usually your palm is out as well. Okay, cool.
So let me see if I can do this so you guys can see it. Can everybody see it? Okay, so what it says is numbers 1 through 5 are always facing me unless you're signing an address, telephone number, or a series of numbers in a group. So if you have a series of numbers in a group, then yeah, they would face out. But if you were going to be mixing those with letters, I would turn them in for clarification between certain letters. Just mainly the 2 and the V. That's the only one that would really hang anybody up. But that's just what they say. Yeah.
Sorry, did you want
to... I was looking at that.
But this is actually a really cool book, too, because they have, like, the ASL Alphabet, and you've always seen it from, like, this perspective, right? But you typically don't see it from this perspective. And there's a picture in this book towards the beginning where they have a picture of all the alphabet letters, both from the front side, like you typically would see it, and also from the back of the hand, so what it looks like from your perspective as you're fingerspelling. So that's kind of it's a cool picture that I haven't seen anywhere else online. But it's just one of those things that I thought was kind of interesting. It's this one right here.
Oh, yeah. So it's showing it from the back of the hand versus from the front.
And that kind of helps, too, like with certain letters like Z. And we're like, well, is it right-handed, left-handed? Is it mirrored? Because are they using the selfie camera? Are they using the refreezing camera? And it can be a little confusing. And it's funny, like if you look up Z is one of those things where depending on what chart you find, it shows it both going this way and going that way. Like the arrow, even though the palm is out on both of them, the arrows don't match. And I was able to find like 3 or 4 different variations. And, you know, if you look at ASL Connect, Gallaudet, ASL Meredith, and Signed with Har, ASL That, Bill Vickers, they all go away from the body and then in towards the body and then out from the body. And so you're looking at your finger and you're basically drawing the Z in the air from your perspective, not the other person's perspective. Unless you're left-handed, and then you know you're still going away from the body, but then it becomes a mirror of itself, right? If you're doing A, B, C, and then you get to Z. She's kind of a unicorn where she kind of does the dance move, Z. But
a unicorn.
Typically it's mirrored. Anyways, that's a bit of a tangent. So getting back on track, so we left off on like the doubles and the twisting of the wrist, right? For like 67, 76. So if we make it to the hundreds, we covered 100, 1C, or 100, and that carries all the way up to like 999. So 200 could be could be 2C, and again, it's not 200, it's not 200, it's 200 or 200. And same thing, I'll just do shorthand, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. Right? So you could do 999. And it's kind of neat. You can do up to 999 just with one hand. It's not until you get into the thousands that you start doing two-handed gestures. So for 1,000, you just put out your palm in one hand. You again number out 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, and etc. Right?
And then 200,000. So and then it'll still pull and go in, or 2C, your preference. 1,000, and you have 1,000 million bounces. So one bounce would be million. Bounce would be billion. So it bounces one each time you add
a comma.
A comma. I almost said a 0. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So every time you add a comma, there's an additional bounce. So 1,000, million, billion, and then trillion.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll see million with an M. Sometimes you'll see billion with the B. Not too common. Usually it's, you know, let's say we do, let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 123,456,000. 789. So that you can start stringing those together, and once you get past the like 29, you can pretty much generalize from there and produce any number you want. You know, once you know 1,000, million, billion, and anything above a billion is just, you'll see this sign, right? It's just like, it's just a lot, right? Millions and millions and millions and millions and millions.
You'll just see him do it.
And if you wanted to like really be technical and go into the trillions and quadrillions, you would fingerspell it from there on up. Like you know, you're not going to do quadrillion, trillion, and if you're going up above that, then you're using exponents or scientific method. Okay, so there's numbers. Madison?
I was wondering if you've seen other like variations for million or billion. I originally learned it with like the commas, like you said, but I don't remember where I saw it. Maybe it was like the Daily Moth when they're discussing like COVID cases, and I don't remember what exactly the sign was. It might have been like a shaking M or a shaking B or something like that. I don't know if you've seen anything like that.
Shorthand.
Yeah.
Like 5 million.
If you're reading like a statistic and they have like that 9B or 7M or whatever, yeah, I mean,
can see that as being
I understand it. I've never seen it personally.
But I understand.
But again, yeah, it makes sense. If you just really want to.
On TV, that's going to be very confusing if you're trying to be precise, because you're looking out through a screen, typically of another screen, because of how they look, how an interpreter looks, you know, and so that if that interpreter's not clear, I could see that being difficult. And for that, especially talking about COVID, they have to be precise.
And fast.
So I could see them doing a shorthand for million and billion.
Annette,
I think, I might be wrong, but I thought maybe Alex from Gideon Watt, does he slide the million?
Yeah, I think it might be something like this too that I've seen.
I think he might have done an M and slide, I think, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, and again, those could be very common variations. Typically, like, I mean, we're kind of set in our ways at this point. We've been doing this for like 11 years. We've been interpreting for like 7. And so, like, precision is pretty important when you're talking about like statistics. And so whatever is going to be most comprehensible to who you're communicating with, you want to make sure that you adapt to that. And I have some students that would prefer me to fingerspell out million than me do million. Yeah, and so billion can be tough. If you have to say how many people are on the planet right now and they're doing a book report or they're doing something, it's like, okay, it's 8,700 something million. Ugh. And to sign that and to do billion and then million and then thousand, it can be a little confusing. But yeah, whatever makes that clear and whatever is more commonly used in your area, then I would go with that. And, you know, just become comfortable with it. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's just we want to make sure that we can be clearly understood and understand others. So being understood might just be kind of picking a style and sticking with it, and then understanding others, becoming as familiar with as many variations as possible. And, you know, here we are over a decade in, and we're still learning variations for millions. So thanks, I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to try to get past the numbers and go to ordinal numbers. And these are just first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And these are pretty easy. You just take the number and it twists a little bit. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. And again, context is going to help a little bit with this because you're like, well, was it 19 or was it... And again, like 19, that 10 kind of helps between ninth, or maybe you're talking about $9, like where we'll get into money. But ordinal numbers is just a twist. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. Double, triple, quadruple. So you're going to have your palm out like this, and double, we're doubling it, and it's going to start from your palm, and it's going to go up. Double. Triple, probably guessed it, 3. Quadruple, and then this turns into 5 times. Not like I did it 5 times, but 5 times the amount, 500%. And then you could do 6, 7, 8, 9. But yeah, so typically it's just double, triple, quadruple. Okay, so now we're going to be going like 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Like, oh, I went to Disneyland 2 times last year. So if it's an event, it'll bounce off your wrist, right? So like, oh, 1 time I went. That happened just 1 time. Oh, Disneyland, I went 2 times last year. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And again, that can go up to 9. And anything above that, you could do 10 times. And again, that's going to be a little bit different than like if you're doing a multiplication problem and you're like, oh, what's 10 times 9? That's going to have a different sign than I went to visit Catalina Island 10 times. Let's see here. So time.
Chris?
Yeah.
Where can I find this information at? What book? The numbers? Not that I care. But I just want to learn.
Yeah. As far as books, it's a little tough. Like this is probably one of the better ones that I found that goes over numbers in a little bit more detail.
It's interesting.
And like a lot of the basic vocabulary books will have those in there. You might actually be better off with online ASL dictionaries. And unfortunately, like usually they don't have a lot of variations. So like if you look up, how do you sign 16? They'll probably only have 1 variation on there. They probably won't show you 16 and then show you 16 and then show you 16. they'll probably just have one. But again, like numbers is just kind of one of those things that becomes more natural over the years. And again, like the more exposure you get, the more you'll be able to kind of pick up on those patterns, realize the differences, and how to put them into your own conversations as well. But you can really get a lot of distance out of just signing, and you could cheat a little bit. Like if you wanted to do, like if you're just learning, and you're saying, oh, I wanted to go visit my aunt 3 times next week. I'm going to go visit my aunt 3 times. You don't have to memorize this. You could sign 3 times, right? And they're still going to understand you. A lot of this is just shorthand. And again, like the 1,234, you could do 1,234, or you could just do 1,234. So don't worry too much about trying to memorize all these things. And if you would like, you can always go back through this video and say like, oh, what were the 16 through 19? What were the 20s? And you can kind of have that ability to rewind and kind of see the variations in today's workshop, because that can be really tough to find those variations online or in books. Did that answer your question, Jerry?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm trying to speed it up a little bit. Going into money. So just 2 signs so one sign with 2 variations and then another sign. So first one's dollar. So you'll see some do dollar like this, and you'll see others do dollar like this. So dollar or dollar. And let me know, like, which one have you guys seen, for those that have been signing? Up on the top, Madison's seen both. Yeah, so you'll see dollar or dollar. And then the other one is cents, right? Cents. So like if you wanted to cheat a little bit and say, oh, how much did that cost? It cost $1.25. You could sign 1 or 1, it doesn't really matter too much in that case, dollar or dollar, and then you could do 25 cents. So like, oh yeah, that cost $1.25. You could sign it that way. Another way is if you wanted to do $1.25. Cent 25. And this is really common for like quarter, or sorry, not, this is smart. But cents, 25, or you could do 25 cents. Both, again, are super common and variable. And then for like nickel and dime, sometimes they're shortened down to that sign. There's not a sign for nickel, and there's not a sign for dime. It's just 5 cents, 10 cents. So you'd see like nickel, cents 5, or you could do 5 cents, and then same thing for like dime, 10 cents or 10 cents. So typically, like if you're in an educational setting and you say, hey, do you have a dime? Or like the kids are learning penny, nickel, dime, quarter, just to help them differentiate between the coin and the number, you'd start with cents and then go out. So like penny, nickel, dime, and then quarter. And again, you don't have to remember all this. You could just do 10 cents, 25 cents, and that can kind of be a little easier to remember than all the shorthands. And then dollar. This is one that we just talked about recently in another class, and usually like we've just seen like $1 or $1. But there is a shorthand for it, and it's a little different than the ordinal numbers. Remember, first, second, third. So $1, $2, $3 twists in a little bit. $1, $2, $3. And again, that's shorthand. So in most cases, you will probably say, hey, that cost $25.99, right? You would do $25.99. That's the easier way of doing it. But if you wanted to be more technical, you could do, I guess, I don't think there is a shorthand. You would just do $25.99 now that I'm signing it. The shorthand stuff is usually just for smaller amounts, quantities, or numbers. Whew. It feels like I've been talking for a while. And maybe just a few signs that you might want to be familiar with is for pay, buy, sell, shop. So for pay, you would do pay. You could do it with the P. This is a bit of an older sign. You'll still see it around. Johnny's pointing to herself. She still signs it like that. Pay or pay. Buy. So you're just basically taking the money you have and you're giving it to the person. Buy. Shop. You're just going to shop around. Just shopping. And sell. You're just basically giving it away. Sell. Let me throw in cost real quick. So this could be cost or price. So you just take the X hand shape, cha-ching, price or cost. Okay. Math. So for math, I'm actually going to leave a link in the chat window, and I'm going to leave a link to DeafTEC, and they have an entire math dictionary. They don't cover more of the basic functions, so I'll review that with you today. But if you ever wanted to learn more about like how to sign equations or exponents or acute angles and like all those math terms, that's a great resource to use. And again, I'll leave the link in the chat. But just to go over some basics: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So addition, you're just going to add it to the top. Add. Subtraction, you're going to take it off the top. Subtract. Multiply, you're going to take, kind of making like a giant X in the air. Multiply. And divide. Divide. It kind of looks like you're cracking an egg. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, and divide. And then equals. And this is also sometimes a sign for equation. Some people will do equation, but it's becoming more common to see equation. Answer. Okay, positive and negative. So you might notice that we didn't do add and we didn't do subtract, because when you're discussing math, this is positive, like a positive integer versus a negative integer. And then you would have the addition and subtraction. So you have those signs that are different to differentiate. Okay, exponents, fractions, and decimals. I'll make this quick again. Exponent, this is just a sign for exponent. But if you're using it in an equation, like you're saying, what is 2 squared, or 2 to the second power, you would have that 2, and then that squared twists. 10 squared, or to the second power. And same thing if you had 10 to the third power, 10 to the fourth power. And so you have exponent, and then you would have the exponent itself, whatever number, like if it's 3 squared, and then you would twist it. Fractions. So the sign for fraction is going to be a couple ways. So you have kind of that line that goes across, and then the letter F for fraction. Or you'll probably see this one too, with the index finger extended for fraction. If you wanted to sign a fraction, let's do 1/2. 1/2. Or 1/2. There's a couple ways of doing it. Depends on, again, your area, your student's preferences, or the person you're talking to. Typically it's 1/2, like you're just, you're having the numerator and then the denominator below it. 3/4, 5/8, or you could do that twisting motion to the side to really make it clear that you're signing a fraction and not just, numbers in sequence. Let's see here. Decimals. Say easiest for last. You just dot that decimal. Period. So like 1.25, 1.25, right? And that's basically it. Actually, I was just going to share my screen with you if you wanted to go in a little bit deeper. So many of you probably are familiar with this resources page here, and on the online dictionaries, I have this category here for STEM dictionary by DeafTEC. And you have lab sciences, so this is going to cover like biology and different lab science terms. But here's math. And this is going to take you to their STEM dictionary for math. And you can actually look up words yourself if you're curious about how to sign. Let's go to equation really quick. So this is what I really like about this website is it will give you the definition. So they'll give you the sign and it describe what that definition is in sign language. And then you would have it used in a sentence. And you have the text down here as well. So here we have in the equation, x plus 5 equals 10. So x equals 5 is the answer. So this is what it looks like in sign language. You might notice that she did addition like this. Usually it's like this, but you could also do addition. Another sign is all together, and sometimes they'll use this for like what's the sum or the summation, but you'll actually more commonly use it like, oh, we learned all of these things, and you put all of those things together, like what did you learn? You learned what? So that's just math in a nutshell. Any questions? Let's see.
I guess like I think in one of the resources on the numbers, I think it was last week, we had like a list of numbers resources. I think when they were signing like half and third, like they had it outwards as well. So I mean, I guess it goes back to it being like a quantity. I don't know, like all the rules. It always confuses me because I always like see it differently. I don't know if you have any like knowledge about when it should be out, when it should be in, or like if it just really varies a lot.
It's one of those things that it's just a variation. And again, like I was doing research for this workshop, and I just like to learn from as many people as possible. ASL that had a video with fractions, and he did it this way. You look it up on Google, it's this way for like 1/2, for example. But in the real world, like most deaf students that we've worked with and clients that we've worked with, meetings and done business meetings and college meetings and corporate meetings and like lots of situations where they're talking about fractions, right? Usually with all the people that we've worked with, they'll do 1/2 like this. And you're saying 1/2, right?
Yeah, I think it was like, yeah.
So it's super common. You know, there's variations for everything. Like, you know, the letter N, right? Like some people have a tight grip on it. Some people have a loose grip on it. Some people just point it out like that. And fractions is going to be the same. Like there's not a right or a wrong way. There's just broken record, right? Become familiar with how other people sign it most commonly in your area or with the people that you're with. And kind of stick to that because you want to, you know, you don't want to be the one person out of 100 say, well, so-and-so taught me this way and this is the right way. I think it's more clear. This is my opinion. And then we're kind of out of sync with everybody else, you know.
Yeah, I never say there's like a right way to sign something, but I'm always interested if there are like different rules that people have learned or ways of doing it, because just to make it easier so I'm not like being unclear when I'm signing or something. If I want people to understand it, so yeah.
The challenge is real too, because I mean there are wrong ways of signing things, right? And that we can get ourselves into trouble. Like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to sign that. Real quick one. We meant to sign this, like you have pity on somebody, but we did this. Totally different, very wrong. This is touch, 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 touch. Sometimes this is used for like molestation, so it's like that was a really big miscommunication on our part. So like those mistakes happen, and believe me, I never made that mistake again. So you know, I do appreciate the question and like wanting to be accurate. And with fractions, unfortunately, as it is right now, maybe it'll become more standardized as time comes on. And again, it's kind of new. Like especially the higher maths, like if you look into like calculus, advanced algebra, trigonometry, geometry, like those types of terms are still pretty new. Like I would probably gauge that they're maybe 10, 15 years that they've started to develop the signs for these things. Like up until then, it's just been fingerspelling, like, right? Like, oh, here's an acute angle. And there was it was just so much fingerspelling. And it's not until more recently that signs are being developed and invented and discussed within the deaf community, particularly those that are like undergraduates, right? That are deaf and going through these classes, sometimes for the first time. So, staying up to date, just hanging in there and become as exposed to how everybody else is signing it. And, you'll kind of by default start signing like them and just absorbing as much as possible. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and end it there. Thanks for hanging in there. I know it gets kind of not so fun when we start talking about money and math and equations and stuff, but you hung in there and appreciate it. We're always learning, and if we become a student that is always learning, we're going to be in really good shape.